Welcome to the Restricted Handling Podcast. Let's dig in. Here's what's been going on in Russia in the last 24 hours. Picking up from where we left off yesterday, the big through line is still energy warfare. But today's picture is less about warning signs and more about confirmation. The strikes everyone was bracing for didn't just stay theoretical. Russia followed through with another large wave of drone and missile attacks, and the effects are now visible in Kyiv itself. Overnight strikes hit the capital's east bank, cutting both power and water supplies. Non-residential buildings were damaged, cars burned out, and large parts of the city went dark again. This comes right after Kyiv logged its longest outages of the war so far, with electricity unavailable for up to 16 hours a day in some areas. Yesterday, it was prepare for more. Today, it's this is what more looks like. The nuclear adjacent risk we talked about yesterday is also sharpening. Ukrainian officials continue to warn that Russia is actively reconnoitering substations tied to nuclear power plants, and they've formally briefed international nuclear regulators. One backup line to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant was restored, which is good news, but the bigger issue hasn't gone away. Russia doesn't need a catastrophic strike to create leverage. Repeatedly knocking out grid connections is enough to inject uncertainty into nuclear safety, and that uncertainty alone rattles both civilians and international partners. It's pressure warfare, not escalation for escalation's sake. Ukraine, for its part, is adjusting in real time. Yesterday, we talked about Kyiv leaning into interceptor drones as a way to survive mass Shahed attacks without bleeding out its missile inventory. Today, President Zelensky put more structure around that idea, announcing a full shift in air defense doctrine. This isn't just new gear, it's a new way of fighting. Mobile fire groups, short-range assets, and interceptor drones are being integrated under a new deputy Air Force commander whose sole job is to make this system work. The subtext is clear. Ukraine is assuming these drone waves are not a temporary phase. They're planning for this to be the norm. And the scale still matters. In the latest wave, Russia launched 145 drones from multiple directions, including from Crimea and deep inside Russian territory. Ukraine intercepted most of them, but enough got through to damage energy and industrial sites across multiple regions. This is now a math problem both sides are grinding through. How many drones can you launch? How many can you intercept? And how much damage slips through the cracks? It's less Top Gun, more spreadsheet warfare. While the skies stay busy, the ground fight continues its slow, grinding rhythm. Russian forces are claiming marginal advances in parts of Sumy and Kharkiv regions, while Ukrainian units have pushed forward around Kostiantynivka. One notable update here is Russia reportedly splitting its forces near Kostiantynivka into two tactical groupings, aiming to squeeze the city from different directions and eventually push toward Kramatorsk. This isn't a sudden breakthrough. It's methodical repositioning. Ukrainian officials are also continuing to push back on Russian claims of encirclements near Kupiansk, which we talked about yesterday. That story hasn't changed much. Russia says it's winning there. Ukraine keeps producing evidence that says otherwise. What has evolved is the picture of how Russia is fighting. Reports from multiple fronts describe Russian units relying on very small assault groups, minimal armor, and whatever mobility they can scrape together. In some southern areas, Russian troops are reportedly using horses again to move supplies and personnel. That's not some romantic throwback to the Red Army. It's a sign of adaptation under constraint. When drones own the air, anything loud, armored, or predictable gets targeted fast. Ukraine is also keeping pressure on Russian rear areas. Ukrainian drones struck the Saratov oil refinery overnight, and that's part of a broader pattern we've been tracking. Energy targets inside Russia are fair game now, and Ukraine is clearly trying to impose costs that go beyond the front line. There's also a notable naval update. Satellite imagery shows that a Russian Kilo-class submarine hit by Ukrainian underwater drones back in December still hasn't moved. Russian media claimed it was undamaged. The satellite imagery suggests otherwise. That submarine carries caliber cruise missiles, so even one sidelined hull has real implications. Now let's zoom out to Moscow, because the domestic signaling there is getting louder and more explicit. New reporting suggests Vladimir Putin personally shaped a preliminary list of top candidates for the ruling United Russia Party ahead of the 2026 State Duma elections. This list isn't about legislating, it's about messaging. At the top is Dmitry Medvedev, who has spent the last 2 years sounding like he's auditioning for the role of most aggressive man on Russian Telegram. His placement isn't accidental, it's a signal that his rhetoric, nuclear threats, warnings to Europe, no compromise war talk, is not fringe. It's approved. Right behind him is Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, still pushing the line that any peace deal must resolve the fate of so-called Novorossiya, which conveniently includes huge chunks of Ukraine Russia doesn't even control. Add in a Kremlin-aligned military blogger and the head of Russia's youth militarization movement, and the picture is pretty stark. Moscow is not preparing its population for peace. It's preparing them for endurance. At the same time, Russia is still showing up to diplomacy, and the contrast is almost theatrical. Kremlin envoy Kirill Dmitriev is heading to Davos for more talks with U.S. intermediaries, including Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. Ukrainian negotiators are also in town. Everyone is talking, everyone is meeting, and Russia is still launching drones at Kyiv. If yesterday felt like watching someone negotiate while flipping the table, today feels like them doing it with better lighting. That surreal tone continues with Moscow claiming Putin has been invited to join a US-backed board of peace focused on Gaza. The concept is vague, the membership is eclectic, and some major countries have already declined to participate. Russia, however, is leaning into the symbolism. Being invited matters more than what the board actually does. It feeds the narrative that Russia is a global power broker, not an isolated aggressor, even as it rejects ceasefires in Ukraine. Russian media is also having a field day with Western political friction. Yesterday, we talked about Moscow cheering tensions over Greenland. That messaging hasn't slowed. Russian commentators are openly framing U.S. pressure on Denmark and NATO allies as proof the alliance is cracking. There's very little criticism of Washington here. Instead, Europe gets portrayed as divided and weak, which fits neatly into decades-old Soviet-era narratives about Western decay. Same song, new remix. Inside Russia, the repression dial keeps turning. The state internet watchdog blocked nearly 1.3 million web pages last year, driven by expanded definitions of illegal content and AI-powered monitoring tools. VPNs, LGBTQ-related material, and other previously gray area content are now firmly in the crosshairs. The Kremlin also designated a French law firm as undesirable for helping submit evidence to the International Criminal Court related to Ukrainian children. That's a reminder that Moscow isn't just fighting the war on the battlefield, it's fighting accountability itself. Economically, the numbers are catching up to the reality. The IMF cut Russia's 2026 growth forecast to under 1%. This isn't collapse, but it's stagnation. After the defense spending surge of 2024, the momentum is gone. Russia appears willing to accept low growth as the price of sustaining the war, betting that control and endurance matter more than prosperity. Finally, the hybrid war continues to surface in unexpected places. Swedish authorities revealed that individuals posing as nuns used churches to raise funds for Russian military units and spread pro-war messaging. It sounds absurd, but it fits a familiar pattern. Soft spaces, exploited for hard purposes. Its influence work dressed up as charity, and European security services are increasingly alert to it. Thanks so much for listening and for being part of the RH community. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribing, leaving a quick 5-star review, or sharing it with someone you know makes a huge difference. It's how this network will grow. We also publish a daily written intel brief on Substack, where you'll find even deeper coverage of Russia and China, along with insights on Iran, the Middle East, and the DPRK.